All right, welcome to the Waterdale East Flamborough Heritage Society September public meeting. On this National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, I would like to acknowledge that this meeting is being held on the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, as well as the lands of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and Wendat Confederacy. The territory of what is today called Flamborough is part of a number of treaties, including the Dish with One Spoon and the 1764 Treaty of Niagara, the latter of which extended the Silver Covenant chain of friendship into the Great Lakes region. Today, the city of Hamilton is home to many Indigenous people across Turtle Island, and we recognize that we must do more to learn about the rich history of this land, so that we can better understand our roles as residents, neighbors, partners, and caretakers. Since it's Orange Shirt Day, National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, there are some resources that Nathan Tidridge had sent to me to help with the learning and listening that we can do with our Native partners. One is the Truth and Reconciliation, the actual form. There's a second part to it that says what we have learned, the principles of the Truth and Reconciliation. It's different than the calls to the action that you might hear about in the media. And it kind of details the work of the commission and summarizes the history of residential schools in Canada, the principles of what needs to happen between Canada and Indigenous peoples in order to pursue reconciliation, as well as the definition of reconciliation. Other things is that Netflix just released a new documentary called For Love, in which Indigenous people share heartbreaking stories that reveal the injustices inflicted by the Canadian child welfare system. Other ones there's a lot of great Indigenous authors, particularly anything by Thomas King, David A. Robertson, and Richard Wagamese are ones that are good to start off with. As well as a few websites you can go to, especially with our treaty partners, the Mississauga Credit. They have their website with community events and other learning opportunities. There's more that you can learn about the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. That's at the Woodland Center, Cultural Center. You can find that online as well. And even right here in Flamborough, we have the Sue Harrison National Area that has a number of plaques to help discuss the history of Indigenous history in the area. As well as we also have the Waterdale Treaty Forest up at Joe Sam's, as well as many resources in the archives. The Heritage Society is really pleased to be partnered with the Legion. Well, first, we're going to be here for this season. Today's meeting is on Friday, but our next meetings are all going to be on a Wednesday night here at the Legion. So our next meeting is October 26th. That will be here. We have the history of Lowville with Helen Calloway. So we look forward to that and seeing everybody there. But also the Heritage Society, the Legion, Rotary, the Lions, and the BIA, and the theater. We've all come together to celebrate the 100th anniversary of Memorial Hall, and that takes place on Remembrance Day. It goes on November 11th to the 13th. There'll be a lot of different events going on, presentations, a bunch of other things. But, there'll be more information coming about that. We'll definitely talk about it next meeting and everything kind of gets hashed out. So put that in your calendar. It'll be a great community event. Let's see, other thing, if you haven't paid your membership, they are due. So go on, see Lynn. Other thing is we're looking to get donations for more shelving in the archives. I think especially with the lockdowns, people have gone through a lot of their closets and attics, and found a lot of documents and stuff to donate. So we are running out of shelving. So we're hoping to get some more shelving on the right side when you walk in and help free up some space there. I think that's all I have to do. Anything else? Oh, okay. All right, great. Tonight we have Ruth Nicholson. Ruth Nicholson graduated from McMaster University with the Fine Arts program and from Queen's University as an elementary and secondary school teacher. Ruth taught with the Halton District School Board for 34 years. She's the past president of the Hamilton branch of the United Empire Loyalist Association of Canada and is currently the Dominion Chair, and she gives talks about the province and life in Upper Canada. Please welcome Ruth.
Right here, Helen Holloway is coming next, and Helen and I just did a paired something for history of North Burlington up at Lowville, and she took me around the cemetery and told me the story. So that's going to be a treat. So we come out and hear about Lowville next month. Am I on? Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. I wish to first recognize that today is the second anniversary of the Truth and Reconciliation Day in Canada. Our local Flamborough Review had an excellent article by Mississauga of First Credit Nation Chief R. Stacey LaForme. I hope you read all of it. He said that it is vital that the non-Indigenous community mark the day, such as by planting flowers in a circle in your backyard. Make them orange if you like. It doesn't have to be grandiose. It can be a small personal thing, as long as it lasts and happens again. I think that's a very wise statement. Now, I do want to thank Carrie Raphael and President Chris Rivet for reaching out and asking me to give my talk on three of my Loyalist heroes. I was encouraged to compose this presentation by an author friend, Jean Ray Baxter, as she knows that I'm full of stories, most especially of family history. I hope you enjoy hearing these remarkable pieces of these three lives this evening. So good evening, and thanks to all who are attending. Today, as we are hopefully nearing the end of this COVID pandemic, we talk about healthcare workers, teachers, cashiers, and all manner of frontline workers as heroes, and rightly so. They are all stepping up in this time of crisis and need. The stories that you'll be hearing today also reflect a time of crisis and need. So what is a hero? There are many qualities that make a hero. To me, it's a person who takes risks to make change. It's a person who put him or herself out there to possibly sustain ridicule over a controversial stand. It's a warrior or a soldier who is fighting for a cause. It's a person doing undercover work that is done in the name of protecting a great truth. And it's being on the ground floor creating a country, a nation. That is what I see when examining the lives and actions of Robert Land, Isaac Ferriss, and John Cornwall. To begin, I will tell you about the most famous of these three, Robert Land. Among historians in the Hamilton area, Robert Land's story is well known. It has a rough, honorable, and romantic edge to it that endears itself to most who have knowledge of it. This picture is of the former Robert Land Elementary School. It was an educational and social hub for over 90 years, and it was built in 1914. When it closed, the people in the area wanted to retain a community resource center, and thus the Eva Rothwell Center was born. It has educational and recreational services for this area, and the Robert Land name remains prominently imprinted in the cement above the center's new title. Back to Robert Land. There are conflicting accounts about his birthplace. Early family research states that he was born in Tiverton, Devonshire, England in 1738. Then the muster roll for the New York troops, where Land enlisted, shows his birthplace as New York. Regardless, he settled in Calkins Creek in the Delaware Valley of Pennsylvania, and there he built a log cabin. He was short, stout, and fair, and in 1757, he married a girl who was quite the opposite, tall and dark-haired, named Phoebe Scott. He would have been 19, and Phoebe would have been 21 at the time of their marriage. As a side note, Phoebe's brother is the famous rebel leader Lieutenant Colonel Winfield Scott of Queenston Heights, Spain, where Sir Isaac Rock fought his last battle. In 1776, when the American Revolution broke out, Robert Land was 37 years old, so not a young man at all. He was a justice of the peace or magistrate with a family of 7 children, aged 19 to infant. Due to his loyalty to King George III, he joined the British forces. With a vast knowledge of the country, Robert Land was selected to carry dispatches from General Henry Clinton in New York to points north and west. According to James Elliott's book, If Ponies Rode Men, The Journeys of Robert Land, 1777 to 1791. Land was also a recruiter for the Crown, which was another difficult role. Here is a photo of James Elliott, historian and author, in front of the Robert Land vault in the Hamilton Cemetery on York Road across from Dundurn Castle. While Robert Land was away, his son Abel was abducted by the local indigenous people. His oldest son John went to rescue Abel, and after running the gauntlet, the younger brother was released. Not long after that episode, John himself was taken prisoner by the rebel authorities, and he was held for the entire war. That's from 1776 to 1783. And John was captured in 1777, so just 1 year into the war. This left Phoebe, their mother, and the younger children to carry on and survive by themselves. One night in the autumn of 1778, when the family had gone to bed, a daughter, Rebecca, often called Kate, was awakened by a friendly indigenous girl who told her to go and see what was happening across the river at the Kane family. Kate crossed the river to discover that the house had been burnt down and the entire family had been murdered. Kate rushed back and quickly awakened her mother and the rest of the family. They hid in the fields, watching their home set ablaze by the rebels. For days, the family hid in the woods, moving stealthily on foot. It took them 10 days to reach New York, the safe haven of the British. Phoebe and her 5 children stayed in New York until the evacuation of the city in 1783. Phoebe eventually received a grant of land along the St. John River in what was to become the new province of New Brunswick, and here the family stayed for 7 years. During this time period, Robert Land was performing dangerous undercover work, carrying orders from British General Sir Henry Clinton from New York to Fort Niagara and Montreal. In March of 1779, he was captured by rebel militia and brought before a military court in Minisink, New York, charged with spying for the British. He was found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging, but his conviction was overturned by none other than General George Washington on the grounds that as an inhabitant of one of the states, Land was not subject to the jurisdiction of a military court. Wasn't you lucky? Land was released on bail on the 30th of September, so that's 243 years ago today. He was released in 1779 on this day to await a new trial, but he jumped bail and joined a small party of Tories heading to Niagara. Robert was in the vicinity of his family home sometime after the property was burned and the family had left. Seeing the ashes and hearing about the Kane family, he surmised that his family had been killed. In great sorrow, Robert Land asked advice of a trusted Quaker neighbor, Ralph Morden, as to the route to Niagara. Ralph showed him an Indian ladder and pointed out the way. The ladder is simply a tree where the branches have been cut close to the trunk to form steps or rungs to climb upwards. It turned out that they were followed by an angry mob of rebels. Morden, who was a pacifist, believed that he would be safe, but the angry mob captured and hung both he and his son-in-law. Robert was faster paced, and he got away, but not before receiving a musket ball on his knapsack that hit with such intensity, it caused him to fall to the ground and cut his hand on a sharp rock. The rebels followed the trail of blood until darkness, and then they gave up, believing that Robert Land had gone off and died somewhere. Land actually kept moving, and he reached Fort Niagara, where he found safety with the British. The year was now 1779, and Robert Land was now 41. He had completed 2 years of dangerous courier work. In 1780, Robert Land resumed his courier work again, traveling between New York, Niagara, and Montreal. In August of 1782, he arrived in Niagara and was not able to leave before the war ended. This is Lundy's Lane, Niagara Falls. As a Loyalist, Robert Land received a grant of 200 acres in the Lundy Lane area of Niagara Falls, Ontario. This is where he lived and brooded over the fate of his family for 3 years. The noise of the Great Falls was so disturbing to him that he moved 50 miles away to the quiet Burlington Bay in what is now Hamilton, Ontario. He lived here well back from the water on a deer trail on a slight rise of land. This is now the south side of Barton Street between Leeming Street and Smith Avenue. He lived in a dugout spot before he built a small log home. He cleared a bit of land and supported himself by hunting, fishing, and trapping in solitude. This area is now the home of St. Matthew's House, a place operated by the local Anglican churches that provide programs and services to meet the needs of the people in the area. As a Loyalist, he petitioned for land in this area on the 3rd of May, 1791, and he was assigned Lot 11 on the 3rd concession of the Township of Barton, containing 100 acres. He farmed, hunted, and fished, and he grew the area's first wheat. Back to the rest of the family. The eldest son, John, was released from confinement after the Revolutionary War. Since he had not taken up arms, he was allowed to own and occupy the family properties in the Delaware Valley. John built a new red home. He married and he raised a family of 11 children. Back in New Brunswick, the youngest son, Robert II, had grown dissatisfied with the harsh conditions and the poor farmland. At the age of 17, he persuaded his mother to migrate with some others to Upper Canada, where life and farming should improve. It was now 1791. They took a ship to New York and visited John at his farm on the way. And here they learned about the death of the Morden men and the reputed death of their father and husband, Robert Sr. John was satisfied with his life in the Delaware Valley, and thus the rest of the family continued on to Niagara. After 1 year in this area, it happened that through an itinerant trader, they heard that a man named Land was living alone at the head of the lake. Young Robert decided to go that 50 miles northwest and see who this man was and if there was a relationship. Not to be left behind, Phoebe and another of her sons, Ephraim, made the journey to the area, and they found Robert sitting outside the cabin, smoking. After 11 years of separation, this was the euphoric moment. Later, 2 other sons and 3 daughters joined the other 4 family members. They worked hard to clear land, and they became successful farmers. After more settlers arrived, Robert went back to woodworking skills and crafted spinning jennies for weaving. And this is, you're going to see a picture of my loom. It belonged to my great-grandmother. And I'm from the Amherstburg area, so the wood from it come from the ships from the War of 1812 when they dismantled it, because that's where the King's Navy Yard was located. So that's my loom. So he was good at spinning jennies. Now, a spinning jenny had 8 spindles instead of 1. So by turning 1 wheel, 8 threads would be spun at once. Most homes did have a loom and multiple spinning wheels to weave fabric for clothing and rugs in particular. Robert Sr. applied for grants of land in 1794, and in 1802, he was allowed 312 acres that stretched from the mountain to the bay and from Wentworth to Emerald Street. Each of his 4 sons, Abel, William, Ephraim, and Robert, acquired 200 acres on adjoining lots. Through land grants and purchases, the Land family came to own a solid block of over 1,000 acres, extending from the bay to the mountain, bounded on the east by Sherman Avenue and on the west by Wellington Street. This is now the central part of Hamilton. Robert Land built a new home at the base of the escarpment at 341 James Street South. It was named Land Home. Only the 2 original pillars to the property remain. The view would have been majestic, right down to the lake. So here's where the home would have been, and you see the pillar. And the next slide should show the pillar up close. That's what they look like today. They're leaning, but they're still there, and that's a piece of Robert Land's history right there. And then the view down to the lake is the next one. And that is St. Joseph's Hospital would be on your right in this picture, going straight down James Street. Robert Sr. assisted Anne Morden, Ralph's widow, and her remaining family to settle in the Dundas Valley. The Dundas Museum has the cradles that were brought up from the Delaware Valley that carried the Morden's infant grandchildren. Not long after Ralph and his son-in-law were hanged, his daughter also died of heartbreak. And so Anne, the grandmother, brought the two infants north to Upper Canada. And there's two of those cradles at the Dundas Museum. Robert Sr. lived to see the beginnings of the village of Hamilton. He died in 1818 at the age of 80. Phoebe, his wife, died in 1826 at the age of 90. And this is at the end of Land Street today that you see where the ships come into the harbor. In my eyes, both Robert and Phoebe Land represented individuals who made many personal sacrifices, who took risks and rose above the strife of war and exile to make a substantial new beginning in a new land. This is our Hamilton Branch Plaquing Committee. The Hamilton branch of the United Empire Loyalist Association of Canada plaqued the main Hamilton Cemetery across from Dundurn Castle, where Robert Land and his family lay in the family vault. The family were originally buried in the old Anglican Cathedral Cemetery. However, in 1853, their son Robert Jr. reinterred his parents to this new vault. When we recognized Robert Land Sr. as the first Loyalist after the American Revolutionary War, over 100 people attended our ceremony in April of 2010. Brian Land, Professor Emeritus from the University of Toronto, a direct descendant of Robert Land, spoke at this ceremony. Other family members had the keys to the vault, and they allowed the public to visit the interior of the crypt. This event brought forward the epic story of Robert Land to the local people once again. Her Honor at that time, Sophia Angelinitis, MPP, Minister of Consumer Affairs, stated, "There is surely no more remarkable story in Hamilton's history than that of Robert Land, the English lad who became a settler, magistrate, farmer, soldier, and spy. A Loyalist who lost everything, both family and home, and regained his family in this place, overlooking the waters of Burlington Bay. Many of you know this remarkable story, far better than I. It's the stuff of which legends are made. And yet, in another way, it's entirely ordinary. Land was among the very first pioneers to settle in this area, but dozens, then hundreds, and thousands came. People like him who left behind all they knew to brave a new land, which used their skill and sweat to build a new life for themselves and the generations yet to be born. And here's another remarkable thing. This is not merely a story of the distant past. They're still coming today. Now, don't those words ring as true today as they did in 2010? My next two examples of heroes are simply from my own research into two of my Loyalist ancestors. They are shorter stories, as no books or speeches of any sort have shone a light on their lives. This is the Isaac Ferriss tombstone. Isaac Ferriss is actually a second-generation Loyalist, being the eldest son of Joseph Ferriss, my Loyalist ancestor on my maternal side of the family. Isaac was born in 1795 on Bois Blanc Island, Essex County. Isaac was just 17 years old when the War of 1812 broke out with alarm at the northwest corner of Essex County. The Americans first invaded Upper Canada in 1812, crossing the Detroit River at River Canard. They were preparing to attack the British at Fort Amherstburg, that's known as Fort Malden today. General Isaac Brock, and this is my friend Bob Rennie, who's the reenactment officer, acting as General Brock. He was alarmed at the American invasion, and he set out with men in 5 bateaux from Fort George in the Niagara area. Many others actually marched to Amherstburg, including 100 men from Grimsby, walked down to Amherstburg. Brock and Tecumseh planned for the Battle of Detroit while in Amherstburg, and this is a monument at Navy Park in Amherstburg honoring the War of 1812. The Essex and Kent volunteers were all part of this plan. Jacques Bobby was in charge of the 1st Kent, and William Caldwell was in charge of the 1st Essex Company of Volunteers, where Isaac Ferriss served as a private. An article in the Amherstburg Echo newspaper from September the 2nd, 1934 states, "One night, General Brock told his soldiers that there were some spies on Bois Blanc Island, and he asked for volunteers to swim the Detroit River in the dark. And to surround them, Isaac Ferriss volunteered, along with one other, to undertake this task, and did it so well at the risk of drowning or death by rifle fire. They both received beautifully engraved medals from Queen Victoria when she came to the throne. This is a photo of the lighthouse and a blockhouse on Wellblanc Island. Queen Victoria actually approved the offering of Military General Service Medal in 1847, not her first year on the throne, but her 10th year on the throne. This is the front and back of the actual medal that Isaac Ferriss received. So these medals went to those surviving claimants who were involved in one of the three most notable battles that were considered great victories for the British, either the Battle of Fort Detroit, the Battle of Chrysler Farms, or the Battle of Shadow Bay. Isaac was now 52 years old when he received that medal. And remember, he was 17 when he was in the battle? So a lot of them wouldn't have been alive to receive those medals. A family member in Amherstburg still owns this medal, and we were fortunate enough to obtain a photograph from this person before he passed away in 2016. My family honored Isaac Ferriss in May of 2014 as a veteran of the War of 1812. This is my nephew Bryce unveiling the plaque, and reenactment men are giving the veteran salute, which is 3 musket blasts. The veteran of 1812 plaque should be our next picture. There it is. And on the one on my side on the left, that's the Niagara River that goes down the middle, and there's a beaver on one side and an eagle with a broken wing on the other side. So you know what that represents. That was the medal. So we received this granite marker by applying to the ongoing gravesite project honoring veterans of 1812. This was initiated by reenactment groups through the Historical Military Establishment of Upper Canada. Isaac Ferriss took part in the Battle of Raisin River and the Battle of the Lomé also. He died in 1881 at the age of 85 and was considered another living legend during his lifetime. These are my 2 certificates through these men. This is the top one is my UE certificate for Joseph Ferriss, and the War of 1812 went for his son Isaac underneath. That certificate was presented in August of 2012 in Harrisburg at the Roots to Boots ceremony, where 9 of our family members from across the country, one of my cousins came from Lethbridge, Alberta to receive that certificate. They attended to honor Isaac Ferriss that day. My final segment is about John Cornwall, my Loyalist ancestor on my paternal side, and he is my 6th great grandfather. And that's my certificate from John Cornwall. He was born and raised in Danbury, Connecticut in 1748, the son of Captain John Cornwall and Hannah Knapp. They lived in a large home on a large property, and today the area actually still bears the Cornwall name. Since John Cornwall always attached himself to the royal cause, he and his family were under suspicion and scrutiny from the rebels right away. After continual persecution, he left Connecticut on May the 2nd of 1776 for New York to join one of the King's regiments. On his way, he was apprehended by the rebels and thrown into prison at Esopus in one of the floating jail ships. He was there for 5 months. He then escaped, so he must have jumped overboard, and he made his way to Albany that summer. In May of 1777, he joined Loyalist Peter Ball, and the 2 of them recruited and led 32 strong men through the wilderness to Lieutenant John Butler, who was on the Susquehanna River. He served as a sergeant that summer and winter under Captain John McDonald. In January, he took the express to Detroit, where he resided until the end of the war. Now, this is the new settlement map coming up, and that is the map of the North Shore of Lake Erie. So all those little lines at the bottom, those are all the lots. There were 97 lots granted in that area. And I've gone back to 4 of them, but everybody intermarried. Once you do one, you can do 25 of them usually. So John Cornwall received lot 97, the most westerly lot of the new settlement and the closest to Amherstburg, beginning in 1786. These lands weren't officially granted until 1792 after the lengthy official survey by Patrick McNiff. This is the Cornwall land petition. By 1789, John Cornwall had developed much of this land and sold it to John Sparkman that year. Cornwall then moved up to the Thames River settlement of Kent County. But I wanted you to see this. This came from Brock University. Brock University has a Loyalist research area that many of the branches have given microfilm and books and all kinds of things to them. And I just phoned up and asked if they could find something on John Cornwall. And this was sent to me, within a day. And this is the only of my ancestors who could write his name. Everyone else had an X, but he didn't only write his name. Look at the whole thing is written by him. So you can see why he had something to do with being the most westerly lot to Amherstburg and helping with early governance. Right. So John Cornwall received that lot 97. So meanwhile, his wife Mary and his 4 children had been driven from their home in Connecticut with only the clothes on their backs. They lived with Mary's sister in a nearby county until the end of the war. Their family joined John in 1797 after an astounding separation of 21 years. John Cornwall was a farmer and a politician. He succeeded Francois Bobby as the legislative representative of Essex County in 1797 at John Gray Simcoe's second Parliament of Upper Canada that ran from 1797 to 1800 at Navy Hall. So Navy Hall is the long building up there. It's now part of Fort George. And during this term, Parliament moved from Newark, which is Niagara-on-the-Lake today, to York, which is Toronto today. It was felt to be more secure position because if you look back, you saw there wasn't very much space on the river between the fort and over to New York State. So they didn't feel, Queen Victoria didn't feel that was a safe spot, and that's why it was moved to Toronto. Okay. It was felt to be more secure and further from the American border. John and his wife, Mary Benedict, had 4 children, 3 sons, Joshua, Wheeler, and John, and a daughter, Mary. John Cornwall's son, Joshua, my 4th great-grandfather, followed his father's footsteps as a parliamentarian in Upper Canada's 7th Parliament that ran from 1817 to 1820, representing the county of Kent. His son Nathan also served as a parliamentarian in the 12th and 13th Parliaments of Upper Canada that went from 1835 to 1840 for Kent County. In summary, here's the street signs with their surnames. I feel that these 3 men, Robert Land, Isaac Ferriss, and John Cornwall, were heroes in a variety of ways, acting as a spy, a recruiter, a soldier, an escapee, a refugee, and a parliamentarian. In all ways, these early residents of Upper Canada and their families helped to shape the country that we live in today. I think their stories are worth relating. Thank you. Just have a couple other slides to show you. This is the Loyalist flag. I did bring one, and you'll see it's missing a little stripe that is on the Union Jack today. So this was the UK flag from 1606 to 1801, when the Cross of St. Patrick for Ireland joined the Red Cross of St. George for England and the White Diagonal Cross for St. Andrew. And then I have a friend that quilted the Loyalist Monument that's in downtown Hamilton, and that's where we have held Loyalist Days many times. Loyalist Day is June 19th every year. And this monument was dedicated by Mr. and Mrs. Stanley Mills, the Mills China people that people around this area know. So they dedicated that on Empire Day, May the 24th of 1929. And I have 2 pages of resources for you. If you have someone that you know was in the War of 1812, you can go to the Graveside Project honoring veterans of 1812, and the main Loyalist page is uelac.ca. That's the main page, and there's a Loyalist directory. And people that have done their research, they put their names on there, so it's alphabetical. And if you know somebody, you just look for the letter and you see it, and they'll give you all the data on it. These are the books that I use. Like David Botsford ran the museum at the Fort Malden area for all of my young life. And that's a beautiful book that he did a lot of talks, and it's called At the End of the Trail, and I own a copy of that. Now, Chris Carter, he's done many books in the area of Harrow and down home where I'm from. And he is the vice president of the Herald Early Immigrant Research Society, HEIRS, and he speaks at many things as well. I did want to show you a commemorative biographical. People ask me, how do you prove the Loyalist ancestry? And this is one book that I've used. This is the Kent County one, and there's an Essex County one. You can see how big they are. These were put together in 1906 by J.H. Beers and Company, and they went to different counties and they talked to all the pioneer early families, and this is the stories of all the pioneer families in Kent County. And the Essex County one, Global Genealogy is the one who made these into books. The Essex County one hasn't been made into a book yet, but my late sister Mary photocopied every single page of it, so it's exactly that big. It's a huge document. So it's great to have that. So then there's books on Butler's Rangers. You can look up to see if the name is listed there. Margaret Houghton, everyone knows, she's written so many books of the Hamilton area, so there's lots on her also about Robert Land. Ernest Lajeunesse was a professor at the University of Windsor. He has a great book called The Windsor Border Region. I think I brought that tonight. I have a great big book on Tecumseh. That's one of my big time heroes, and I'm always looking into things on Tecumseh. So I've given also newspapers, museums, and my email. And I have my little cards over there too. I brought a few research books if you want to look at them. And I have my business card if you want to contact me about anything. Are there any questions? Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you for your time.
When Robert Land was one of the first settlers in Hamilton.
He was.
What was
Yeah.
Hamilton called at the time?
Head of the lake. Yeah, they just called it Head of the Lake. That's why the history or historical society is called the Head of the Lake Society in Hamilton. That's what it was called, Head of the Lake. You're welcome. All right, thank you.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
That was great.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Stay around, coffee, tea, and something a little harder if you'd like. And come join us on Wednesday, October 26th, back here for our next meeting. Have a good night.